practical concern in all of this that I think that bears mentioning, which is that making a game is a little bit different than writing in that to write, I need a sheet of paper and a pen. And to make a game, I can make a game with a sheet of paper and a pen. But when we think about what we mean when we say a game, we generally mean something that's larger in scope and generally involves more than one person, which why I think modding comes up a lot and level design comes up a lot, because it's something that you can actually just do by yourself without a lot of difficulty. That's not to say that I don't think people should be doing it. I just think that there's certain kind of practical constraints that come into the picture when you're talking about doing a game. Just like doing a play, right? It'd be hard for like a single person to do a play. Just realistically, it's difficult. It's not an alienating or a wall that can't be breached. It's just like a little bit more challenging. But I think the idea of using user-generated content in a system like that, if it's structured right, if it's a system that's structured to allow you to do it by yourself, or it's a system that's structured to encourage collaboration such that you can bring together people who can do it, I think then it's a lot more feasible. But that's another thing that often schools have difficulty evaluating, especially in the pre-collegiate level, and even collegiate level, in fact, is like what's the value of a collaborative project? How do you assemble a collaborative project? How do you grade a collaborative project? How do you evaluate skills in a collaborative project? I feel like it's something that I know that versioning game institutions at the collegiate level struggle with enormously. Is in my opinion, anyways. Like I hear the same story over and over again from different people that making a game at the scope of anything like a commercial game, anything approaching a commercial game, actually requires the work of more than one person, and you have to figure out a way to make that possible. I don't think it's impossible. I just think part of the issue has been organizing that practical stuff.
Well, I think there's nobody who's going to argue that a student's paper is as good as their favorite author's. And the way we judge students' understanding of what they've read is how they write about it or speak about it. So perhaps that's the quantifiable method for what people have learned from video games is how they create something else from it, modding or hacking. So maybe that is how we can quantify it.
Right. I was just going to throw in. I worked on addictinggames.com for a while, and there are in fact a lot of people making games on their own. They're typically kind of lame, but sometimes they're pretty darn fun. But it does sort of point to like this little garden of just weirdness that is like these kind of casual flash stuff, that does actually, it's a game, right? But it's nothing like a commercial product. It's a different kind of experiment. Sometimes a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it's a little garden.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's part of the important part too. Please don't take from what I said to think that the idea that I don't think people should be making games, or that I don't think people should be making amateur games. And that obviously there's a difference. It has a role. I think there's a massive and wonderful, like YouTube, it just is an example. It's a wonderful example of doing amateur content that's valuable in its context, enormously valuable. I'm just speaking from a sheerly practical perspective. It's like you need, and I think like half this panel is working on this stuff right now. You need tools that will enable people to do that. I think, and if those tools exist, then people will, and they do where they exist. And there have been projects before. What was the Pixel project? Damn it, I'm not remembering. Something you worked on, Naomi. But yeah, like stuff like that. Give people a tool. They'll make stuff with it, right? I just think you have to. The bar has to come down a little bit, which I think is something that everybody who's been talking about teaching people programming has been talking about for a really long time, so they should talk about it and not me. But bringing the bar down, I think, will assist with that a lot. And it'll exist like everything else does. It'll exist in that sort of wonderful space where people still go to see movies, but then they make movies too. And they realize that their movies aren't the movies they're going to see, but their movies serve a different purpose. They're the gossip purpose, they're the strong tie kinship purpose. Like they serve that role of me seeing my friends do a funny video online, which is cool and maybe even good. But that's actually, the good is not really the purpose.
Right, but it's also, I think that the example that you gave about what you learned in making the game, it wasn't about what you learned about game design necessarily, but it was what you learned about the subject that you were trying to make the game about, or the experience that you were trying to create. So I think that there are different levels of evaluation. We may not need to evaluate the quality of a game unless the point of that exercise is to teach kids about game design. But there's great value in what is learned in the process of the production of the game. So I think there's a range of things that can be assessed around just that production model. Did you have something else?
So yeah, when you were talking, this phrase kept coming into my head. I kept envisioning one day Hillary Clinton is going to write a book called It Takes a Guild.
I also wanted to go back to something you mentioned before, and that is using games as part of a whole system of learning, which I think is really important. I think one thing that, you know, there needs to be more research about is how you can demonstrate that the skills or the knowledge that you learn in a game is connected to another situation outside of the boundary of the game. And I think that that's where scaffolding comes in. I mean, I know that this is not a game, but if you guys have heard of Global Kids, they have a teen island in Second Life, and they basically use, you know, building objects as well as making movies in Second Life as a tool, as part of like a larger curriculum about global awareness. And they've made movies about the genocide in Darfur and things like that. And I think that it's part of a system, and it's been held up as a successful way that a virtual world has been used to teach kids something as part of a larger system.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's kind of going all over the place in terms of what we've been talking about, but it seems like what the education system is missing right now, because it is trying to deal with media literacy and new media literacy, and certainly in teaching people to read and write, and in order to be a better reader, you also need to be a writer. And in this way, I do see a value in actually creating games. The thing here is, it isn't so much creating or producing new media content. It's really producing specific content that, not content, but interaction. And that's what games offers, that environment for an interactive space. And it's understanding what happens in the exchange in that interaction that's missing out of the education, it seems. And the difference between the interactive media and the games points also to, you were mentioning interactive media as an activity, but most of what is being mentioned here really, the World of Warcraft and things, they're experiences that go on and on and on and on. So it's less of feeling like an activity as just living in an interactive world. The difference to me in the games and interactive media is designing that interactive space, be it the developers, the kids, or the educators, that something comes out of it. In a game, there's a reward system. In Grand Theft Auto, that reward system has ethical questions tied to it, versus ethical questions in other interactive spaces. So all of those things coming together are what need to be addressed by the educational system. And all of them are very delicate factors that are weighed to make a positive learning experience, even if what is being learned and what is being interacted upon may be something negative, like, you know, or treason, like World War I. So I don't know. That's more of a.
Oh, it's fine. Absolutely. Comments welcome.
But it does seem to bring together a lot of those kind of issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, I think we have time for just a couple more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think following up with that and some of the other things about skills, you know, 10 years ago I was involved with research around skill standards projects, which were funded by the Department of Labor and Department of Education. I was involved in the Human Services one, and we put out part of that project was an interactive training environment that was more human service based, so it was skills based. What I feel has changed in the past 10 years is that there is a avoidance of real ethical thinking in our society, and a failure to deal with dealing with critical thinking. If we go back, you know, there is that research that shows that quite clearly with scoring rubrics that were developed as a system by scaffolding, there's a whole range of things that were I know were in place at one point in time, and I think at least the secondary educational system would probably run away from, as we run away from it on a larger level with political discourse in society. We avoid these things, whether it be to the right or the left, we avoid these things. So I think gaming does offer the opportunity to bring these things back in a very explicit way, and because it does offer that opportunity, just the way you're saying it, it is more threatening, but it's more powerful.
Right.